first question I have today is simply this. As I said earlier, I call this message Hope, the Game Changer. We put our hope in a lot of things. We've already said some of us put our hope in money, but we put our hope or our trust in a lot of things or people. Sometimes we even put our hope more in things and people more than we do in God. My first question is simply this. What do we put our hope in? I want you to think. I want you just to do a little self-reflect. Just do a little inventory. I know you finished your tax time a few months ago, and you did an inventory of what you've invested into, but just do a quick little inventory of your life right now and ask yourself this simple question. What do I put my hope in? Some of us put them in possessions, it's true. Some of us put them in our mate, the better half of ourselves. Some of us put our hope and our trust, we put it in our job. Some of us in money, like we just read. Some of us put our hope and trust in technology. We live in a very technical age. I honestly, yesterday I was playing in a ball tournament, forgot my smartphone at home, and was lost without it. I know that sounds silly, but because one person couldn't be there because of a funeral, I was the only one that had him on my phone to call. None of us could reach him. We had to drive all over to get in contact, so he knew what time our game was. We put our hope, we put a lot of trust in it, and we sometimes even with our smartphones take pictures and look at those pictures, and that gives us hope. But let's look at Zacchaeus here for a moment. This little guy who climbed this tree. I know what you're saying. What is that flopping out? It's a turkey beard. That's my Bible bookmark. Yeah, I know. Who is that guy up there? Well, at least I'm not eating locusts and honey. And wearing a fur. But let's look at Zacchaeus. Here in verse 1, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. Right there it paints the picture of who he was. Not only was he a tax collector, and in those days, if you were a tax collector, you were dirt. Just imagine right now, do you like, does anyone here like when a salesperson knocks on your door and tries to sell you anything? I know I'm on town council, so we prohibit that from happening in our town unless they get special permission. But it's annoying. It's annoying. You'll be right in the middle of a meal, or you'll be right in doing something, I'll be wrestling with the girls, and I'll hear that knock, knock, knock on the door. And I'm thinking, I don't want one of those, I don't need one of those. And it's almost like they don't want to leave. These tax collectors, we pay taxes in the store, so we don't have them come around and, hey, give us your money now. But back then, they would go around and they would basically collect taxes. You owe this, and they would collect it. So they weren't the popular guys. They're the ones that were taking money from people. But not only that, almost all of them were corrupt. And they would pocket a little bit. How did the people know what the actual amount is? I'm sorry, the king needs this, so give me this. And they would essentially put away what they wanted for themselves. And very seldom would you see a tax collector who wasn't wealthy, because they got a pretty good wage and they stole. I was over in Ukraine, and I remember we just got off the airplane, we started going in our Mashutka, which is like a little mini bus, and we're driving, and all of a sudden this wand, we see up ahead this wand in the dark, sticks out, and I go, what's that? And he goes, never mind, that's the police. And I said, so are they going to give us a ticket? We're not speeding, we're not anything. No, it's we'll probably have to pay them $5 American to get through. I said, what? We didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter. The police only get $120 American a month. And so they're after extra funds. And basically the judges won't, they're paid off too. So they'll just point at you and you have to pay them. I said, this is injustice. Let's fight this. You can't. You can't fight this. And it was almost like that back then. The tax collector got their money and it's their word against yours. I mean, they made a living off of it. And now all of a sudden we see this tax collector, but not only is he a tax collector, but Zacchaeus is the chief guy. So he probably has a bit of the cut of each of the other tax collectors. Guys, if you charge a little more to him, give me 10%. I'm sure. I'm picturing it all. Bob, I can picture it. Can you? And I know that he wasn't a very popular guy because it says nothing of a wife. I'm thinking, yeah, he's probably got a house on the outskirts of town, a big mansion looking out over some water, and that's going to be his satisfaction. That's what he's put his entire hope in, is his money and his possessions. And it doesn't cut it. It doesn't cut it. For him, it just doesn't make a difference. I was up at camp, and I don't know where I said it. Oh, there's a bag around here somewhere, a grocery bag. Set down somewhere. Does anyone see it? I have no idea where I said it. It's disappeared. My daughters will be upset. I have no idea. I walked in with it. Yep, I walked in with the grocery bag and it's vanished. That's okay. What happened was, I went up to camp, and every year at this camp, there's a fishing derby. And I run a youth camp there, and they have me running volleyball tournaments and baseball games and canoe races and a soccer tournament. But through the 2 weeks, there's a fishing derby. I could never figure out why the...
Did you check the kitchen? You ready?
Did I go in the kitchen? I think I just stood at the front. Might be right under that. I have no idea. It's okay. I walked in with it. It's like unbelievable. So I walked. You found it? That's okay. So this fishing derby, I couldn't figure out why this fishing derby went on for the 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, this fishing derby went on. The first week, no one fished. I didn't realize the second week it's free fishing. You don't need your tag for it. So everybody goes out. Well, the stipulation is this. When you go out to fish in this lake, it's a lake with an island in the middle with 18 cottages out on the island, and then all around the outskirts of it is cottages. And what's happened is we do a fishing derby, but there's smaller fish in there because it's fished pretty hard. And the rule is you can't catch a fish during chapel hours. It's disqualified. So I've never gone. I'm more of a hunter. I'm not a fisherman, but my daughters saw that my niece had gone out. In 3 years, she had won this title. So my one daughter, one of my twins, she's 8, she wanted to go out, but she didn't want me to take her out. She wanted the previous champ to take her out, because she would know where the weed beds are or where the rocks are to cast into. Bob, you know what I'm talking about. So, anyways, what happened was Juliana put her trust in her cousin, and she comes in that morning for breakfast and says, "Look," and she's got this fish just under 2 pounds, and in this little lake, that's a good fish because it's so well fished. And we watch, and she beat the previous 4, and then people tried after to catch. And I don't know how many entries under the age of 12, but she had the biggest fish, and it held up. And so she's pretty excited. I had her fishing trophy just to show you. But we sometimes put our trust and we get excited over trophies. We sometimes get excited over things. But my other 2 daughters were a little bit out of place. They wanted to go fishing. Well, I'm not a fisherman, so I said to my father-in-law, "Do you have a boat?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Can you get some bait?" "Oh, yeah. I'll meet you here in the morning." I said, "I kind of want to sleep." I'm hoping for a good night's sleep because I'm doing the youth programs, running the youth every night, and running all different tournaments for the kids during the day. And so I kind of would like to sleep in the morning. But no, the 2 of them, my youngest 5 and my other twin, Brooklyn, they wanted to go out. So we went out that day and we fished and fished and fished, and if we didn't catch 7 fish, and they were excited because The under-12 trophy was already locked up, but there's the pair competition. There's another 2 trophies, and they thought we could win trophies for them too. Well, there was lots of people entered in it. So I look, and we had 1 fish that counted. We got into shore right before chapel started, got it weighed in, and I said, girls, it's meaningless unless we get that other fish. We've got to get 2 fishes to weigh in. So we go out, we caught a few more next day, didn't win, didn't have enough weight. We go out again, and I still remember we're coming ashore, and we got the motor just trolling us ashore, and we come right through a weed bin. We see little weeds all sticking up. And I look at my watch, and it is 10 to 10. We're done. Like, we got to cast out quick, and this is our last time out, and they so badly want to catch it. Well, I no sooner cast than I hook onto a weed. And my daughter casts, she hooks on the weed, and the 2 of us are pulling the whole boat over to the weeds. And as we're going over to the weeds, there's 5 fish swim right by us. I could have reached out and tickled them, you know. And then all of a sudden, these 5 swim by us, and then I see the guy who owns the pond, or the lake. The guy who owns it. He is big. And I'm yelling, if we can just drop a lure in front of him, we got him. Just right in front of him. Well, my father-in-law just cast out, and the other 2 are caught on weeds, and we couldn't get a... And we're still reeling, and we go right by him. I'm watching him, and I'm waving goodbye to the fish. My hope for the trophies for these girls is gone. Brooklyn pulls up from the weed, and she's got a fish. It's not big enough. And I go, guys, it's like now 7 minutes to 10. We can't. We got to go in. So I get up there, and I'm caught on this stupid weed, and I yank up, and there's this big bass hanging off of it. So I quickly take my smartphone, snap a picture so it's before 10, and we gun her for shore. We weighed them in, and I'm telling you, they won the top 2 fish, my daughters. And they had their trophies. And on the ride home, I turned around and looked, and I said to Lynette, you got to get a picture of that. And there's the 3 of them, all in their seats, and they're reclined, holding their trophy like they've won the Stanley Cup, just right to their chest. Some of you have asked, I always bring an updated picture just to show you of the girls. These aren't all mine. This is my youngest, and then these 2 are my twins, and they're with their cousins. So, yeah. Sometimes we put our hope in people, and like my daughter did, she put her hope in her cousin. And then next thing you know, my 2 daughters put their hope in someone who doesn't even fish. But we did it. We did it. The first question is, what do you put your hope in? My second question is, where does Christ rank in your standings? We put our hope in a lot of things. My second question is simply this. Where does Christ rank in our standings? I love watching the ranks. I mean, I've been watching the Pan Am Games. I am so upset that they don't play more of them because I'm switching the channels, wanting to see our... I mean, we were leading. Up until yesterday, we were the top country. The States only have 2 more gold medals than us as of right now. And I think we can still pass them. I'm hoping and believing we're going to win this in our own country. I really am. But we sometimes, in talking of ranking, we sometimes make the classic mistake of ranking things or possessions or something, our hope ahead of Christ. Zacchaeus did. We read right here, he was a wealthy man. Wealth was his God. His hope was in his wealth. But he wasn't satisfied. This is the key part of this. I read this, he was the chief tax collector and was wealthy. It says in the very next verse, he wanted to see who Jesus was. But being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. All of a sudden, this guy who seemingly had it all that money could buy wanted more. He wanted to see who Jesus was. He'd heard about him. He heard that this guy had life, and he heard about the miracles, and everyone, it would be like wildfire. It'd be like somebody seeing a trick with you, pulling a coin out and telling everybody, you gotta go to that guy, you'll get a toonie out of him. Or maybe he'll pull out a 20 for it, I don't know. But you want to know something? When something happens that surprises us or we're not used to, we want to tell everyone about it. So everyone knew about Jesus. And Zacchaeus, being a guy who thought he had it all, really didn't. He wanted more. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. And incredibly, Jesus offered him something. My simple question for number 2 is, where does Christ rank in your standings? Question number 3. What can happen when we put our hope in Christ? I'm going to read here verse 5. It says, when Jesus reached that spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay with you at your house today. Do you guys actually sing that song about Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in the sycamore tree, for the Lord he wanted to see. And as the Savior passed that way, he looked up in the tree, and he said,
Zacchaeus, you come down.
For yes, you know what? I've heard both versions. I'm going to your house for tea, and I'm going to your house today. Actually, it says, I'm going to your house today. But tea sounds like it's a good time, too. It's tea time, yeah. Maybe it was he was going to golf with Zacchaeus. I don't know, it was tea time. No. But here what we see is, this guy, Zacchaeus, all of a sudden climbed up there to get a sight of Jesus. And something happens that transforms Zacchaeus' life. Jesus, who's just, there's crowds of people. He walks by and he turns and he calls them by name. That's very important to the story, because I don't think he had a big name tag that said, hello, my name is Zacchaeus on it. I don't think they had those stickers back then. Jesus knew who he was without knowing who he was. That's an incredible part of the story. Zacchaeus, come down. And what appeals to me in this story is, he says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house. This guy who seemingly was one of the most hated, I'm willing to bet when he walked around town collecting taxes, if people grew the odd tomato, they might stand behind a building and even throw it. This guy was not liked. And all of a sudden, Jesus, who he's heard all about, stops, calls him by name, and says, I'm going to your house. That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. What can happen when we put our hope in Christ? Zacchaeus had hope that there was something more than money. And that day, hope came walking by him. It says all the people saw this. So immediately he came down and he welcomed Jesus to his home gladly. And all the people saw this and began to mutter, he's going to be a guest of that sinner. But Zacchaeus, this is incredible. In fact, Jesus doesn't even say anything to him. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here now I give half of my possessions to the poor. Half of everything I own I'm going to give to the poor. And if I've cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay them back 4 times the amount. And Jesus looked at him and he said, today salvation has come to this house. Because this man too is a son of Abraham. For this Son of Man, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which is lost. I've got the feeling that all of a sudden, Zacchaeus' ranking on the scale of what he put his hope in completely got shuffled. Kind of like the Pan Am Games with Canada and the U.S. flipping. Right now, Zacchaeus has his hope and trust in one person, in one thing, above all others. And that's what we need to have. My dad was an incredible guy. He told stories. If you ever knew my dad, he was a storyteller. My dad used to tell me the story of the one farm that we own just down the road from us. And it's a 50-acre farm. And my dad told me that every day he'd walk by that farm. I know, you know the stories, walking the bare feet. You'd even get the odd story about if it was cold, they'd stick their feet in the cow patties to warm them up on the way there. I've heard all those, right? So my dad said he'd walk, cut across the fields to Plum Creek, Public School, which is now on Waterworks. It used to be called Plum Creek Side Road. And it's still the building there. It's a house now, an older house. But he said as he'd walk across, he would stop every day and say, I'm going to own you one day. He'd say to that property. And he really believed that someday he'd get the money and he'd buy that property. Well, he told me that got on in life, and he was a young man in his late 20s, and he had a chance to buy that property. And he said he felt God telling him, you know, Eldon, buy that property. So he went ahead and bought it. And he said for weeks he lost sleep over it. For weeks he could not sleep because he thought that 50 acres, he paid too much, $1,200 for 50 acres. I know I bought the 50 acres next to it a month ago, and I know what it's gone up in price, if you know what I mean. So my dad said he lost hours of sleep, even though he knew that God told him to buy that property. So he said, God, you got to help me. What am I going to do? So the Lord told him to plant trefoil on the property. Now I know what you're thinking. Trefoil, some of you are going, I don't even know what trefoil is. Is it something you wrap around, something you bake in the oven, like trefoil? No, it's actually, if you go out in your grass, it's pretty well overtaken. Even in your grass, where you see that little viney stuff that grows, the little yellow flower, that's trefoil. And back then, they needed it in the States. They needed seed so badly, and Dad said, he thought, I'm going to try the market, I'm going to grow it. And he took it off for seed, and he sold it to the States. And in 2 years, he paid for the property in 2 years. Then they came in and they said, Eldon, we want to drill for gas. We found a dome. And they drilled for gas, and just going into marriage in 69, was it, Mom?
Yes, and paid for this diamond.
Yes, and yes. Mom got a big rock out of it too. They drilled the rock and she got a big rock. But what happened was they drilled for gas. And Dad said it was paying over $100 a week. And back then, that was like golden. And Dad said they told him, listen, Eldon, it's only going to pump for 3 to 5 years. It pumped for 32 years. They closed it all up. Just recently they came back and they're paying lease again because they want to pump gas in it for storage. Go figure. Dad said they came in and took logs out of it like 10 years ago and gave him $26,000. Dad said that little property has never stopped paying. Best investment he ever did. Why? He said because he put his hope and trust in God. And even in his mind when he thought it was the craziest idea you could ever have done, the Lord speaks it, we put our hope and trust in him, and things happen. I bought the property next to it, and just for kicks, I stood on and I said, you're mine! And I had a little cry because I pictured my dad on the other side. And he's not with us today, but I really miss him. But it's incredible to see what God can do when we allow him to do it. The question is, number 3, what can happen when we put our hope in Christ? He felt God's leading, and he went with it. I'm going to read for you again Hebrews 11, verse 1. Now faith is being sure what we hope for, and certain what we do not see. I want to read for you just Psalm 62. You read it already. I want to just read that one passage one more time. It says here, we find rest, O my soul, in God alone. My hope comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. Amen. What is your hope? What is your hope today? What is your hope? Hope proceeds even through trial. Hope helps us to keep moving forward. If you see any generations that fall off, or people that basically don't go forward, it's people who don't have hope. Where there's hope, they move forward. Hope is alive, and hope fills us with life. I hear all the time, being a youth pastor now 24 and a half years, I started when I was 19 doing youth ministry. And I've heard over and over again through the years, youth have more pressures and temptations than ever before. I had a young man last August who 4 years previous, he went to my junior high group. And that young man 4 years after, I hadn't seen him in 4 years, he committed suicide. I hear people say, I had to do his funeral, that's the hardest thing. I hear people say all the time, there's more pressure today, there's more temptations today. The world has more sin. Sin is more prevalent in our world today. There's more divorce, there's more depression, there's more stress. I hear it all the time. In fact, the latest prediction out there today is by 2030 that over half, 50% of our population will live in depression. That's the stats. And people say, where is our hope? But in the midst of all this gloom, we can be down or we can put our hope in God. And when the world sees that in the midst of trials and despairs and tests, when our hope is in God, they're going to be hungry for that hope that we have.